All right, hopefully you're seeing the video now. So the Neurodevelopment of Learning Part 2, I'm George Hirsch. What this one's about, what the purpose of the presentation is really about, is why we struggle in our thinking. So everybody struggles with the way we think. We want to delve into really those processes, the critical processes that everybody uses to really use their brains every day. So let's just no, let's keep going. So I'm a husband, father, and grandfather. You've heard me say that in the last video. I'm also somebody that was diagnosed at age 30 as being dyslexic. Never officially had ADHD diagnosis, but they all run together, if you ask me. Back then, that was in the 90s. I was 30 years old at the time, and I would say I was pretty hyperactive as far as I've always had a ton of energy. My mom always said that I went 100 miles an hour, and she kind of gave up trying to put me to bed because when I finally fell asleep, it was kind of under my terms. It was never her telling me to go sleep. So I was the 100-mile-an-hour kid, and then collapsing and then waking up pretty early and going again. So that's one thing I haven't shared with a lot of people, but I have been more and more talking about it. There's a lot of stigmatism in the business world, I know, that I lived with until I was about 52, really never talked about it. So, but I really have dedicated my life, especially the last 30 years, of it, discovering tools and strategies and resources that create extraordinary results and incredible levels of personal performance improvement. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when I was 30, I really delved into self-improvement, peak performance. Even though I struggled with learning, I excelled in the business world, excelled in what I call the 3D world. So I think I have a different perspective than most, as college dropout. My third year, I think I have about a little over 75 credit hours, but just could not pass English 101. It was a real struggle, and I guess I flunked it the third year in a row. I flunked English 101, and that sort of set me over the edge of not finishing my degree, even though I had 3 years of college and then went in the business world and became successful. So it's really not bragging about myself, but I've really kind of impacted the lives of hundreds of people with my work in leadership, peak performance, self-improvements, and neurodevelopment. I've studied the neurosciences, and really it gets back to the neural pathways that we all use to learn. So kind of really had a 30-year career in understanding the brain, self-improvement, peak performance, why we do what we do, through my trials and errors. So what I'm going to cover today, really is 4 motivating factors that we all use, how we process information. So knowledge, love, and support, consistent, reliable structure, and transcendency are the 4 that we're going to be talking about. And the first one really is, so learning and information, it's a analytical processing of information is what we all kind of desire and want. So knowledge is kind of the motivating factor here, which is, to me, if you really look at it, that's what we're doing most days, is we're really trying to gain knowledge. And learning, you can learn something, but turning it into knowledge, in my view, this is just my view, is a whole nother thing. To me, it's really being able to understand and use that information that you've learned. And so many people can learn something and then never use it. And that's true whether you could be a visual learner or an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner. I personally, for over half my life, I was pretty much, the only way I learned was doing something. I was a kinesthetic learner. I definitely was not a visual, read it out of a book learner. So that to me was the 2D world. I'm more involved in the 3D world, and hearing it can process stuff, but really that analytical processing. So some of the drivers of that is information, analyzing stuff. You just got a number of different things that we're going to do. So how we want to learn in this processing of information, to me, there's going to be like a safe zone. And, to really learn, you have to, you want to have curiosity and information and collecting data, and analyzing things, and risk assessment. And then ultimately you want to gain that knowledge. And so when you're feeling like you're in that process realm, and later on, and then probably the next few videos, we're going to kind of dig deeper into almost like micro processing there's these 4 major overarching processes we use, and then to me there's these other areas that we can break them down into other things and deal with focus issues, or deciding what's important, what's not important. And so various people use different terminologies, but our brain is processing information. And so we do have these fear zones, is kind of what I'm calling it. And when you get into these, you're into that hamster wheel, and that fear kind of stops you from making a decision, or stops you from really processing the information fully and thinking there's more. So perfectionism, obsession, judgment, ignorance, being cornered, pressured, those are all things that your brain stops processing, starts slowing down, starts warning you about things, expects more out of you. So while you're in this analytical processing realm, your brain is running through all these other scenarios. And when I mean your brain, we can break it down into kind of the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and those are the 2 areas. There's people that talk about the super subconscious mind, which I think there's some real truth to it, but overall you have this mind, body, and spirit, and you're trying to tap into it all the time, but there is mechanisms in there that are working. It's, to me, what's been fascinating studying the brain. It's come a long way, but it still gets down to mechanics and how things work, and there's science behind things, but there's also the unknown. And don't let anybody fool you that everybody has all the answers. Scientists and studies and all the different things that have been going on with people over the years, it's a lot of trial and error. And with brain imaging, we can still see some things, but the brain is something that these these connections are so small and minute, and tracing their pathways and tracing everything is still, I mean, they're mapping the brain, they're doing things right now, but you know, everybody, we all don't have all the answers. We just have our, you know, what's worked for us. So years and years of what's worked for me is what I'm trying to help parents and adults. You know, I really didn't learn all this stuff until I was in my mid-30s, and so it's really, you can change at any time. We know neuroplasticity and really neurogenesis happens. So so we want to look at those things. So love and support, you know, that you've got these factors, and you know, this way of processing stuff. So obviously motivation and love, you know, the driver's connection, service, approval, pretty commonsensical things. You feel like you're in that safe zone when, you know, you feel like you care, loyalty, stability. Sorry, it didn't pop up. Thoughtfulness. So, you know, you just, you know, you've got to think in those terms and realize that that's all going to make your brain feel comfortable and continue to process that information faster than when it's living in fear and living in that fear zone, and you're living in neediness, passivity, risk aversion, complacency, or the worst to me is victimhood. You don't want to feel like you're a victim of something else. And you know, I understand. I wish somebody maybe would have had accommodations for me when I was going to school. I think it was the school of hard knocks and the feelings behind not being good. I guess maybe I didn't let it get to me as much. It probably had a psychological happening to me, but I kind of fought through it. I know there's a lot of kids that struggle. There's a lot of adults that struggle. But we don't want to play the victim, but it's very easy to play the victim. And then once you play the victim, then you start accommodating instead of finding your strengths and dealing with your weaknesses. I think is probably the biggest thing, is dealing with the weaknesses, because you definitely want to even work on your strengths, but you want to also look at those weaker areas. No one likes to look at their weak areas. So structural processes, you know, consistent, reliable structure, results. So we all like results. Kind of what I was leading up to in this one. We all feel better. You know, we like to have goals. We like success. We like winning. If you're even if you don't play sports, there's a deep underlying competition in all of us. And it could be who's the fastest reader, who's the best speller, who can get the test done the fastest. I know that was always a big one for me. It was always the kid that got the test done first. I was probably the last guy doing the test. It still bothered you. It still bothered me. And so you've got these factors again. And you know, when you're feeling in that safe, you know, that rigor, that discipline, determination, healthy competition. I guess there's a big word there. You know, determination, persistence, healthy competition, ambition, decisiveness. Those are all things that our brain likes. That when we're processing in that area, we feel good about ourselves. We feel like we're being successful and we're winning. And so it gets back to this, you know, this third process, and our brain's doing all these things simultaneously in our subconscious mind, really not in our conscious realm. And yet there's all these little trigger points. And when the brain feels safe, when you feel safe, but your brain, your subconscious feels safe. These are all kind of the structural processes that people like when they're looking in that fear zone. You know, controls, stubbornness, you know, self-righteousness, greedy, rigidity. Those are all areas that just frustrate you and bring your brain back into not processing at its optimal levels. And you know, I just can't say enough is that when it breaks down, there's another underlying reason it does that. I broke this up because I didn't want to make this hour-and-a-half or 2-hour long webinar, workshop, or something to try to help people understand the brain's processes and why your child's struggling and why you can see them, you know, living in these things. So they don't, you know, everybody likes to control their own self and their environment. But we are all, our brain is working for us. So structurally, our brain is working for us. So conceptual processes, you know, vision for growth. Can we think there's a future? Is there a bigger picture out there? You know, gosh, I'm not even thinking. I'm thinking of a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it is that greater purpose. That is there a vision down the road? Can you see yourself? Can your child see them getting a college degree when they're struggling? I can't tell you how many times I've tested a child that, I should say, a young adult. Usually they're seniors in high school, and they're, you know, I've got a friend of mine that I go to church with, and tested his son, and I think he's 17 and graduating from high school, yet couldn't read at the 4th grade level, spelling at I think the 3rd or 4th grade level, and math he made had been 7th grade level, and his dad's thinking he's going to college and going to be successful, and he looked at me and said, "You think I can really go to college when I'm reading? I've told you." And a month later, he's suicidal and really struggling. So, you know, it's heartbreaking when you do an evaluation on somebody like this. And I know there's millions of kids out there struggling. And as a matter of fact, the majority of kids are struggling. They can't even think of, say, transcendence and do they have inspiration and new ideas and have fun. And I didn't mean to get into too many stories. I always try to tell people, I go, I have probably been reluctant, even though I get a ton of compliments on our programs and all the help that we've done with people. You know, I obviously don't want to share names. I need to turn them more into case studies and show and tell all the success stories. I just don't like putting the kids and the adult, even the adults that have gone through our programs. I don't want to say embarrassment, but there's still so much stigmatism around it, whether they got off their medication or whether they became a great student or a better student even. You know, yeah, I hate to put them underneath that and expose them to saying, "Hey, get me a testimonial, get me do this." So, sorry, get off on something else. But so SafeZone, creativity, influence, enthusiasm, persuasion, poise, spontaneity, charm. All these things are your brain's feeling safe. I know I could spend a lot of time on each one of these, but I wanted to go as quickly as possible and deal with them and not take too much of your time. And again, we'll get back into escapism, fantasy, grandiosity, egomaniac, and overindulgence. Those are all things that just set your brain up to pull back. I mean, resistance, as I said before, your brain starts resisting, and then it goes into resentment, and then it goes into revenge, as we talked about before. And every one of these fear zones is the start of resistance. So at some point, it's going to tie together. Everything's going to tie together, and hopefully, you can understand that it is so key when you start resisting things. You become aware of it, and you become aware of it. And once you become aware of it, it's how you're evaluating it. And I think I'm going to make a video on that, just the brain and the way you evaluate saying good or bad, right or wrong, should be doing this, shouldn't be doing that. Yet instead, you might be able to think, what can I learn from that? What could you learn from doing something? Anyway, so what we covered today was these four core motivating factors, and really, you see these processes, you really want to look at that: knowledge, information, analyze, love, connection, service, approval, results, goals, success, win, and transcendent inspiration, new ideas, and fun. So the journey of discovery, trust, and influence. Again, trust and influence, right? How do we make it safe? That a safe journey to learn, a safe environment for an individual to be in. I don't know how many of you work and feel safe in your environment, whether you're working or whether you're at home. I know there's places people live and they don't feel even safe in their own home. And I'm sorry that's happening. I really do feel sorry for anybody that's living in that's kind of a structure, and hopefully you can get yourself out of it. But, we need to have that safety returns from relaxing and feel good, especially about the people they're dealing with. So that's why you like being around the people you like being around. I think a lot of people, the problem is I can't tell you how many people I've heard say, change your friends, get rid of the bad people. And it's sort of like, but those are relatives or somebody that's you work with. You have to, the accommodations aren't just get rid of everything. Why wouldn't you want to learn how to deal with people? Because it's how you're evaluating. They are who they are. You are who you are. The way you improve is to improve your ability to think, to improve your ability to process in all four of these ways. So that's what we've been trying to talk about, is your brain's processing ability. It's kind of like my story of, I always talk about iPhones and how many different versions, and this phone's slower than this phone. You want the fastest phone, and it's about the information being processed. Your brain's processing everything. It's your eyes and your skin, your hands, you're physically feeling things, you're seeing things, are taking in billions of bits of information in microseconds, but your brain is processing it. And that disconnect or the connectivity inside your brain and the trillions of synapses that are happening are coming out of, sometimes it's almost always your brain is processing information, and stress is one way that it processes information, and it also stretches the brain. So in fear, safety returns from knowing the score, winning, especially in competitive situations. That's why gameplay and live gameplay with somebody is the way we really like to learn the best. There's the neuroscience named Bo Lotto. He's really big on education and gameplay, live activities. He falls kind of right in line with my thinking. And anyway, so next steps, everybody lives in their fears, and fears compromise good decisions. If you're fearful, you kind of get into analysis paralysis, or you get into anxiety. It's always about making decisions. So if anxiety comes from having two choices, more than two choices sometimes, and then knowing which one's more important than the other. And again, I'll get into more and more of that as we dig into this series. I hope you keep watching them, and You know, because most parents get frustrated when their child is struggling and falling behind their peers. We see this over and over again, is that, you know, you're frustrated because they're struggling and you don't know a way to help them. And that frustration just kind of keeps things happening in the wrong way. So, so just remember that, you know, clarity and support over time kind of equals that structure, and we'll dig into how trauma tomorrow, or I don't know, I'm trying to send these out every couple of days, so we'll dig into how trauma forms all human behavior in tomorrow's video. So I hope you stay tuned. Again, I'll try to not make these too long, but we'll keep working on it, and realize that trauma, to me, the trauma stress, you may not think it's traumatic, but it could be for that individual. I know firsthand that sitting in a classroom, having a teacher say something to me, like, I don't even know what language you're writing down. That's not English, or those aren't the letters we're practicing. I think I was in 3rd grade, is traumatic. And it was traumatic to me. I did an evaluation a week ago on a boy that, you know, he made it to, I think, 8th or 9th grade, dropped out. He's 21 now. His mom said he's a mess, but he dropped out. He just quit because of a teacher. It just breaks my heart. So have a good day, and we look forward to talking to you. Thanks.